Okay, let's configure the R1 router so that it can authenticate to the WinRadius server, the NAS or network access server right here at PCA, right? So a couple of things we're going to need. I'm going to open up this PCA again here. There it is. And there's the WinRadius server that's running. And if you go to settings, we're going to notice a couple things about it. The network access server secret password for the WinRadius server is WinRadius. That's the default. We're going to need this password to access the server. So notice capital W, capital R is case sensitive. Also, the authorization port is going to happen on port 1812. The accounting port is going to happen on port 1813, right? So we're going to need to know that. We also created a user, which you're going to have to remember that we created called rad user, capital R, capital U, and then the password was rad user pass. And so we're going to need that information also. The IP address of this PC, right, which has the WinRadius server on it, is located at 192.168.1.3. So this is 1.3 over here. The router is 1.1. So we'll open up the router here and we'll configure it so that it authenticates to that Radius server. So I've got the router open here. Preferences, font size, take it to 16. Hit enter. Type enable, right? Conf T, get to global config mode. And what we're going to do is we'll say AAA new model to activate AAA services. Then what we'll do is we'll say AAA, let's set up some authentication. Authentication, login. We're going to start with the default login feature, right? We're going to use, instead of, put a question mark here, instead of local or local case, right? Or none to start with, we're going to start with group. So we'll put in group, then we'll put in a question mark, and you'll see you've got two choices, a Radius server or a TACAX Plus server here. Or we could do both, one after the other. So what we'll do is we'll say AAA authentication login default group, and we'll say Radius. And then since we're testing this out and we don't want to get locked out of our router, right, what we'll do is we'll put a secondary access method of none. So if there's no usernames and passwords in the Radius server and that doesn't work, we'll be able to log in directly to the router. Now that is a security risk because you're basically allowing anybody to connect to the router if you put none here. But it's okay when you're just doing testing, right? So anyway, so as a test we'll start with that, right? And now once we've done that, we need to put in the we need to tell the router where is the Radius server. So we'll say Radius dash server host 192.168.1.3. That's where it's located at. The key for the server is WinRadius, right? That's the secret password that accesses the WinRadius server. So we'll say enter, right? Okay, and that's all good. We'll do Control C and we'll test it out. We'll exit, hit return to get started, and we'll say, okay, our user is rad user, right? Enter, and our password is rad user pass, and hit enter, and we should be getting some communication. We should already be in, and we're not in. So that's not a good sign, right? So hopefully the none will kick in, and it did. The none came in, and we are actually granted access, even though it looks like we didn't authenticate. We'll type enable, and then we'll do a show running configuration. And when we do that, I'll hit spacebar, spacebar, spacebar. You'll see that the Radius server host 1.3, that's correct, but you can see here that the authentication port, right, and the accounting port are set to 1645 and 1646, and they need to be set from the WinRadius server to 1812 and 1813, right? So we need to fix that. All right, so what we'll do is we will say, I'm just going to take this, I'm going to copy this line right here, copy, and then I'll do a conf t, right, and then I'll paste that in there, and what I want to do is up arrow it, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say no space, I'm doing a no Radius Server host 192.168.1.3 auth port 1645, accounting port 1646, right? And then this is going off screen here. Then key WinRadius, right? So I'm putting a no in front of that whole line, right? That's going to be important, so I'm going to remove that. Okay, and I'll hit enter, right? So that got rid of that. Then I'll do an up arrow and bring the command back, and I'll change this. I'm using the arrows on my keyboard to 1813, and then I'll arrow over with my keyboard and change this to 1812, and then I'll arrow all the way over to the beginning and get rid of the no, and I'll hit enter, right? Now Control C, copy, run, enter, copy, run, start. There we go. Hit enter to save my startup configuration file. And I want to double check my startup configuration file by doing a show run. I'll hit the space bar again, and then I'm checking this to make sure it's correct. Radius server host 1.3, perfect. Authentication port 1812, good. Counting port 1813, good. And the key is WinRadius. Alright, that should be good. So now, if I exit the router, right, hit enter to get started, put in my username, I should get in quickly. Rad user, enter, and then the password, rad user pass. And you can see that I got in right away. Now I'll type enable, and now I'm in privileged mode. Let's go take a look at our server to see, and you can see here, and it tells you right in the Radius server, if you click on and open up PCA, you'll see right on the Radius server that it tells us that we've authenticated with a timestamp right here, right? And it tells you it's authenticated. So there you have it. So that's a very simple configuration to help the Cisco router use the Radius server as an external source for username and database and authenticating externally to a network access server.